Boo. So as of lately on YouTube, I've noticed a pretty interesting trend happening where, everyone seems to be rereading books that they've read in the past, like the early 2000s, that kind of stuff. Just very nostalgic reads, really. Um, and obviously, as soon as I saw this trend, I was like, I have to do this. Well, in particular, the first book that came to mind for me was The Vampire Academy. Where to even begin? This was like the early 2000s, around this time, like the supernatural books. Oh, not supernatural, but the supernatural books were getting pretty popular. So, like vampire books, werewolf books, that kind of stuff. So, I believe Twilight was around this time when that was like getting out there. Vampire Academy, Vampire Diaries, Cirque du Freak. So, like, just vampires in general was a very hot topic in the early 2000s. So, me, by 2013, 2014 is when I stumbled across the Vampire Academy series. And boy, let me tell you, I fell in and I fell hard. Now, I'm not proud to admit I was a Wattpad consumer. I was a Wattpad girly. No longer am. That is a past I wish not to dig up any longer. Not touching that. No. But Vampire Academy was a pretty big staple read for me in my nostalgia category, in that little area for me. I remember reading Vampire Academy, loving it, and then seeing that there was a spin-off series called the Bloodline series that followed two other characters, and that was my bread and butter. The Bloodline series was my favorite. Words cannot even describe how obsessed I was with the book series. Bread and butter, bread and butter. So good, I loved it. So today, I'm going to attempt to give you the shortest recap I can give of the Vampire Academy book, the first book. I read this series just to see what younger Shayla was freaking the heck out over, like what 24-year-old me thought of these books that 13, 14, 12, I was around that age somewhere, just trying to figure out what I liked about those books. I remember really loving these books. Like I said before, the Bloodline series was eat it up. Eat it up. Although I didn't finish it. Even back then, I was DNFing books. So, let's dive into it, I guess. Let's get started. So the start of this book starts out in Portland, Oregon, where we find our main characters, Rose and Lisa. Lisa is what we call a Moroi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I believe it's Moroi, which is basically just a kind of vampire. And specifically, she's a royal Moroi. So, even higher prestige than a vampire. Rose is what we consider a novice guardian, which means that she's in training to protect a Moroi. And the Moroi of her choosing, or at least the one that she's been close to majority of her life, would be Lisa. Basically, what we gather, is that they're on the run from the school. There seems to be have been people following them, trying to track them down and getting them to come back to the Vampire Academy. Rose and Lisa are in some kind of dorm room or house for some kind of, I would assume, a college campus. Rose notices that Lisa hasn't really fed for like 2-3 days, and she needs blood, so Rose offers blood up to her. The thing about Moroi, and when they feed on people, whether it's a vampire, a human, those two specifically, I believe, is that they don't feel pain during the feeding. If anything, the person being fed on feels like an immense amount of just high. Their saliva releases some kind of like druggy toxin. So, since Lisa hasn't fed for such a long time, Rose gets kind of dizzy and is also high at the same time from like all the blood that Lisa took from her. So Lisa just goes downstairs and is like, hey, I'm going to grab you some food, just to help you get back up on your feet. So in the midst of Lisa going downstairs, grabbing Rose some food, Rose notices the cat Oscar, is walking along the windowsill. The cat acts kind of weird looking out the window. Rose goes ahead and looks to where Oscar is like kind of having a reaction to, and she sees some guy standing out on the street. And it seems to be that he has been watching Lisa feed off of Rose this entire time. So obviously Rose is panicked. She's like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta leave. So she runs downstairs, let Lisa know like, hey, there's like, we have to go, we gotta leave right now. Lisa used her power of compulsion on the guy that was there so that they could take his car and go. I believe all Moroi have compulsion. So they take his keys, they book it down the street. Then immediately I believe they're being chased. Like they're straight up just being chased by these people. During this small little chase scene down the street, Rose is still trying to recover from having Lisa feed off of her. So she's still kind of high and a little weak at the same time. So her reflexes aren't very, on top of it. Now, as the reader, chapter 1, we're like, okay, a lot is happening right now. This is when we discover that they've been on the run for 2 years now. So, apparently she's evaded a lot of different things, a lot of different guardians. She's evaded, I believe, different kinds of hounds. She's just been running with Lisa this entire time. So during this chase, they do get stopped by a guardian. They get surrounded. Rose does go in to describe the guardian that's in front of her. From what I remember, it was lots of brown ponytail, brown eyes, brown coat, brown. And she, I believe, gets in some kind of fight with him, like trying to fight, or like she just jumps at him, which kind of surprises him because he wasn't really expecting that. And of course, she gets takedown almost immediately, like no competition with how that happens. We do find out that his name is Dimitri. He is one of like the I wouldn't say high level, but he is a very well trained guardian. He has a couple of marks on his neck that signify how many Strigoi he has killed, and we'll get into Strigoi later. And so he basically just says like, hey, I'm here to take you guys back to the Vampire Academy. Cue the credits. So, on the airplane back to the school, the girls are separated. Lisa is put somewhere else different than Rose is on this private jet back to the academy, just to keep them separated so that Rose doesn't come up with another idea as to how to bust them out and have them get back to running again. And this is where we find out that Lisa and Rose have some kind of special connection where strong emotions from Lisa specifically can bring Rose right into her body. So it's kind of like seeing through her eyes kind of thing without Lisa really knowing. This ability is going to play such a huge part in this book. I can't remember if it plays a bigger part later on in the series, but it does play pretty heavily in this book. We do eventually land in Montana, where this academy is located, and almost immediately, like, they're brought right into the school, and they do kind of like a walk of shame, not really, through the cafeteria. And surprise, surprise, with the most convenient timing ever, everyone's out for lunch. We see Lisa's ex-boyfriend, we see a couple of Rose's friends, and like Rose is like smirking and trying to act cool. I say trying because, good Lord, this book was cringe. Like, I don't know what like young me thought. Like, I thought I was consuming the best thing ever. And it kind of still is. I still love this book. It's okay for two things to be true at once. But, they make it to the headmistress's office. In the office there, we see Lisa's guardian. And I don't mean like fight guardian, but we see like her parental figure, which is her Uncle Victor, who is also known as the Prince. He's not really her uncle. They are distant in a way. In terms of blood, they are very distant, but in terms of like relationship with each other, he's taking care of her and stuff like that. She sees him as her uncle. We find out though that her uncle has been raising her since she was a certain age, given that her family got in a bad accident, and so she was the only one to survive along with Rose. In the office, the headmistress, she's basically had enough, and she's like ready to like kick Rose to the road. She's like ready to be like, bye girly, bye. Dimitri stops all this and goes like, hey, well, hold on. I saw something interesting on the plane. And he basically just says like, hey, they seem to share some kind of special bond with each other that it's actually kind of rare and unheard of. The mistress already is like, okay, well, if that's the case, then, I guess we do have to hold on to Rose, but there are consequences to these said actions, right? The reason that the headmistress to begin with was kind of upset, and I don't mean kind of, she was pretty fucking upset. Well, the reason why she was upset about the girls leaving is because like Moroi in a way are kind of like going extinct. We have these bad villains who are like kind of the bane of Moroi in human and vampire existence are these other kinds of vampires called Strigoi. They're kind of just dead. They're vampires who have just turned over to the dark side, really. And you become a Strigoi by basically like when you feed off of someone, just draining the blood from them completely, and that turns you into a Strigoi. The reason being is because like all Moroi do have some kind of power, some kind of magic. It's an elemental magic, right? That just overall just resonates with the earth. So you turning into a Strigoi from draining someone completely just shows that like you're going against that magic in a way. And so the consequences of those actions are to become Strigoi. So you no longer have magic. You're basically kind of dead in a way. You have red eyes, I believe blue skin. I think I'm probably imagining stuff with the blue skin, but I believe it's just red eyes. You can no longer walk out in the sunlight. You're only allowed to be out at night, really. And it's just not a fun lifestyle whatsoever. And if anything, the Strigoi are the villains of this story. The only way you can survive as a Strigoi is if you continue to feed off of Moroi specifically. Moroi only, I believe. Basically, Lisa, in my opinion, just gets a slap on the wrist, if anything. And Rose is the one who gets the severity of the punishment, which is just her not being able to go out and socialize. She's basically just condemned to her dorm room if she's not in classes. Rose is like, that's fine, as long as like I'm not away from Lisa, like I get to still see her, yada, yada, yada. And the headmistress is like, well, in that case, Dimitri is going to be assigned to Lisa as like her actual guardian. And Rose is kind of upset about that because she's like, well, I'm her guardian. And the headmistress is like, well, honey, you haven't like graduated yet, so technically you're not a guardian. After that little talk in office, the mistress is then like, okay, well, we still have time, so you can still make at least your classes for the day. Rose does bring up that it's kind of cruel that they have to, like, same day they get back to academy, they're going straight into their classes. She's given her class schedule. She goes to her classes. The first half of her classes are specifically dedicated to training for a guardian, and then the next half are like a mixed class. You're with both novices and Moroi, so like mixed classes happen at the later half of the day. So that's when she gets to see Lisa, I believe, for 2 of their classes. Since it's been 2 years, Rose has missed out on a lot of like physical training. So she has been given a bunch of extra training courses, and she was told by the headmistress, like, hey, like, you're also going to spend any free time that you have training to get back up to the level you should be at if you had stayed for the 2 years. We go to her first class of the day, and it's a training course with other novices, like basically like, a fighting training session. And one of her old friends, like there's Mason, and a couple of them she used to hang out with. Mason, we're going to hear his name quite a lot in this book specifically. I would say he's a side character, nothing main about him. She walks in there, it says the cringiest stuff. It's so cringe, I gotta read it to you. She says, so keep in mind, she just walked into her first class. Everyone stopped what they were doing to like stare at her. And she's like, oh, well, I need to like break the silence, but I also need to make sure that I reestablish that I'm like the head honcho here. She's basically saying like, I need to reestablish my toughness kind of stuff, which is so fucking cringe, dude. She goes like, hey, Mason, wipe the drool off your face. If you're going to think about me naked, do it in your own time. Okay. All right. So you can already tell like what kind of story we're diving into here, dude. To be the person I was when I forgot about this book. Basically, she says like, oh, I have to make some kind of statement, and that is the statement she says to reestablish herself. And like apparently everyone starts laughing at Mason, so it works. So, you know, because she missed out on training, she is assigned a guardian to help her with that training. And guess what? That guardian is Dimitri, right? And so she tells Mason, like, yeah, no, like, I just have to do like some extra training with Dimitri to catch up. And Mason's like, Dimitri is like a god at like being a guardian or like fighting or whatever. And that you're going to figure that out during your training session. If somebody's going to speak like that in regards of someone being very, very like great at like fighting and stuff like that, you're gonna have high expectations. So Rose, you know, rightfully so, has high expectations about that. We do basically go through some of the day with her in terms of her classes and like the reactions of others, the reactions of the teachers who see her. She goes to her second class, I believe, and I think the name of the guy is like Guardian Alto or something, and he basically like just tries to embarrass her by asking a whole bunch of stupid questions. Well, not stupid, but I feel like he's just trying to embarrass her and be like, oh, you think you know everything because you were out on the field and you've been gone for 2 years and blah, 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 blah. It's stupid stuff, really, in my opinion. I mean, she is kind of upset with herself already because in that first period, or it's the training period, she does get her ass handed to her and realizes that she is actually behind on training. So she's already well aware of this stuff. So like to have like a teacher sit here and belittle a 17-year-old, keep in mind, like someone who's probably in their 30s belittling a 17-year-old is just odd behavior. And so he just does that and becomes an ass. And I will say, like, going through her little class periods of the day is not really much important. What is important to note is that conveniently, the Guardians do rotate. And I don't mean conveniently as in, like, oh man, the Guardians rotate through the day. Just like the Guardians do rotate throughout the school and sit in different classes just to protect the different kinds of Moroi that are in there, protect the students in a way. And Dimitri just so happens to be on this rotation list where he's kind of just like watching over the majority of Rose's classes. You follow? So after her classes, she ends up speaking with Dimitri a little bit. She calls him handsome. And he asks her a bunch of questions like, hey, while you were gone, did you play a sport? Do you play a sport currently? Because he's wanting to know this information specifically because he's in charge of training her and getting her back up to the level she should be at. And she's like, no, I don't play a sport. She's arrogant, like pretty fucking arrogant. And Dimitri just takes her down a couple of pegs.
I'm gonna need for you to bring it down 3 more notches.
And tells her like straight up, like, you are not at the level you should be at. You shouldn't be proud of yourself. Obviously, Rose is not happy to hear about Dimitri basically like telling her she did a terrible job. And she gets upset and is like, I kept her alive, didn't I? Which gives the same energy as someone saying, but did you die? And he just basically tells her like, hey, you may share a special bond with Lisa, but if you can't get your shit together, you're not going to be a guardian for her, period. They rather have someone who could do the job rather than someone who has a bond but can't do the job. That kind of like snaps her a little bit and she's like, well, maybe I do need to take this stuff seriously. It is after her talk with Dimitri. Again, this is around the time she's heading towards lunch, or to the commons as they call it, where she also runs into Prince Victor. He just basically thanks her for protecting Lisa while they were out on a run for 2 years. And like, she did do an impressive job, which I believe is kind of contradictory to what Dimitri is trying to deliver to Rose, because I believe she is the type where you could just blow and she will get a big head and float away. So he says, you know, hey, I've been studying the bonds that are kind of similar or the same as the one that you and Lisa share. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, yeah, no, I've been studying on on it, reading some books up, like what happens in your bond. And she does tell him that she can feel emotions from Lisa, and he goes, oh, okay, but she does leave out the fact that she can go into Lisa's eyes, but like she can go into Lisa's body, and so like, you know, they part their ways. He gets ready to ask her another question, but he kind of does go into a pretty bad coughing fit because, again, he has a condition. I forgot the name of it. They mention it, but he does have a condition where he's basically just dying. They go their separate ways. She's heading to the commons, like, you know, before, and except she's getting like a spike of emotion coming from Lisa. It's then that we find out that Lisa is being bullied by her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. You follow? Rose does come to her rescue and be like, hey, don't talk to her that way. No, she doesn't say that. She says like, oh, she has standards and she's not going to talk to you. So after that whole little bully session that was happening to Lisa, Rose does like take her into the cafeteria. They grab some food and Lisa's like, hold on, I need to feed. So they go to the feeders. Lisa goes there to basically get her fill of blood. And from what we find out here, feeders are specifically just humans meant for the Moroi to feed off of. And like, of course, like I said before, they don't die. They just get super high. And like, Rose does watch Lisa feed off of one lady, and she does get a little bit jealous because she used to be in that place, and I guess that addiction, that high, gets like, it turns into, like I said, an addiction. And Rose does start to like look down on feeders in a way. She sees them kind of in a disgusting light, and it's like, oh, well, they're here to like provide blood to the Moroi, and it's just like they're just here just to get their fix. And it's like, girl, you're one to talk. Really, you're one to talk. But then also, I feel like the Guardians is no like controversial opinion, I guess with Rose specifically, but like I feel like the Guardians are in the same kind of boat as well, like because you're basically giving your life to the Moroi as well. If something happens, you have to jump in front of whatever it is, a bullet, a strigoi, something, you know, you have to jump in front. You put your life on the line for them, you know. I would say probably in a more serious way than a feeder, but like still, yeah, like come on now, like respect the system, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. Lisa finishes feeding, and then they go back to the cafeteria for Rose to grab some food to munch on. Now, in the academy here, like I said before, the Moroi do have like elemental powers, and when you become a strigoi, you do lose all of that because you're basically like committing a crime against Earth and the magic that it's providing you with, right? So the academy in a way was created to help Moroi get a hold and establish their powers, their elemental power, or whatever it may be, wind, earth, fire, water, I believe is what that is. The academy is working in two regards. One, in terms of the Moroi and getting them used to their magic and how to use it and stuff like that. While in the other regard, novices are training to become guardians to protect the Moroi. It is in this cafeteria where we see like just like any other high school book. Gosh, I don't like reading high school books. Because I can't relate to that stuff. So it just kind of cringe for me to read it. And that is just my opinion. Somebody else can enjoy that stuff. I personally just don't. It is just like, you know, classic YA stuff where there are cliques, there's groups and stuff like that. And so specifically here, we realize that the only clique that matters is the Royal Moroi clique. And Lisa used to be a part of that. Aaron, her ex-boyfriend, is in that royal clique or whatever. We do get like a small talk between Rose and Lisa where we figure out like Rose is just telling like Lisa like, hey, we should leave again, and Lisa's like, maybe we should just stay, it's fine. And we do find out that like 2 years ago when they left, that Lisa felt like people were watching her and she just felt kind of uncomfortable. Obviously there's something more to that story and we'll get to that. Rose does agree with Lisa and is like, okay, fine, if you're okay with staying, we'll stay then. And so she tells her, but like, hey, like, let's coast through this. We only have like a year left. Like, let's coast through school. Let's not do anything crazy. You don't need to join the royal crew anymore. Like, any of that stuff that's going on, don't feel obligated to do it. And so she's like, oh, well, I don't know. Well, you know, the different types of characters in that group do have kind of power plays and stuff like that, yada, yada. And now here's a thing that I got from reading this part. If you feel like you have to hang out with a certain group of people just because you feel like you need to and you're uncomfortable, but you're trying to justify that, then maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with these people. Just like life tip. It's the quality that matters, not the quantity, okay? And so at the end of their conversation, Dimitri does come by to grab Rose to take her on to her first extra practice with him of the day. It's on their walk to the gym for this training that Rose is taken into Lisa's body. We see that her hiding spot right now is above the church. The church's attic where she's just chilling and hanging out. And then that's when we get introduced to Christian, who is also a Moroi, whose parents turned Strigoi. So he doesn't really have a very good rep around the school, as people believe he one day will turn Strigoi as well, since his parents are. One thing to note, as a Strigoi, you are immortal. But in order to maintain that immorality, you do need to consume Moroi blood. So that's also why like attacks at vampires' academies are common. And this academy, I believe, has not had one yet. This is the first book, so we have no clue. I did read a good amount of the books in the series. I just completely forgot everything, to be honest. But we find out that they're both hanging out in the attic and having like a small conversation with each other. In this conversation, him and Lisa do kind of connect in a way and can relate to each other in different kinds of areas. And so like they both agreed to share this space as like a like solace kind of space. Christian does ask her like, hey, like, how did you feed outside of the academy? Like, how was the world, first of all, outside of the academy? And then how did you feed? Like, how did you survive? She's just like, oh, I figured it out. But he doesn't believe her. He realizes that she fed off of Rose the entire time. And apparently this is kind of like a taboo kind of thing for Moroi to feed off of a dampire, is it makes the dampire seem like not a good person. That's just a secret that Rose and Lisa do not want getting out. Eventually, Rose does get back in her head. She's in the training ground with Dimitri. At this point, we see this 17-year-old crushing on like this 25, 24-year-old. Yeah, I had to look up ages because like I think this was the part where I was like, this is kind of suspicious. Like she's kind of like just crushing kind of hard on this guy, and like this is kind of odd. And I did look at the ages, and I was in first shocked. I really was. Yeah. And I think that like sticks with me this entire book and kind of just changes the tone for me completely. After the training, Rose does go back to her dorm as she's supposed to, and she's just laying there thinking, and she gets like a message from her mother. Her mother is also a guardian, a pretty well-known guardian, famous in a way. She tells her like, hey, I'm glad you're back, but your behavior was like just not okay whatsoever. So her mom is like really not a mom. This is probably the only contact we get concerning her mom. The next day, she does come across Lisa and tells Lisa like, hey, I saw you in the attic with Christian and that needs to stop now. And so Lisa's upset that, you know, obviously like Rose invaded her privacy. She's just like, okay, like I'll try, but like I did have a fun time speaking with him. In their class for that day, she does bump into Jesse, who is another Moroi kid that she finds attractive, and like he's like, oh, tell us about that fight you had last year in Mrs. Karp's class. And she does recount the fight, and this makes her think back to how crazy that teacher was, because at the time Miss Karp was considered pretty crazy, and I would say Rose had quite a bit of contact with her outside of teaching hours and was able to like really get a fresh view on her. Now, one thing I will say that I have a problem with this book is just there's so many just cringy personalities happening here. Like I'm just like, it's not fun. We first get Rose trying to act all cool, and she tells Jesse, he's like, oh, we're gonna have like some kind of kickback later tonight, and she's like, oh, well, I can't, I'm in prison, like I'm stuck to my room, I can't go anywhere. And he's like, well, can't you get off on good behavior? And she's like, sure, if I was ever good. Yeah. Those are the kind of lines we're working with here. It is the next day, though, where Rose does go speak to the headmistress and ask about going to church. It is Sunday. She's in the church. She's bored, but at least she gets to be with Lisa. And then she also notices that Christian is in church as well, and his whole philosophy is that Strigoi cannot go on the holy grounds, so he thinks that if he just goes to church and shows up there and seems devoted, that people will stop believing that he will eventually go Strigoi as soon as he gets a chance. It is in this sermon where Rose hears the mention of a figure named Anna, who was the guardian of Saint Vladimir, and apparently she was shadow kissed. And this is where we kind of just dive into what shadow kissed is. And Rose is like, okay, well, hold on, that sounds kind of familiar. Let me get a little bit more information about that. So after the church service, she does go up to the priest and ask him a couple questions about shadow kiss. And Katie's like, well, I don't really have a lot of information, but here, take this book. Maybe there's something in there that you can find on her. After receiving this book from the priest, it's then that she does catch Lisa and a couple of others gossiping about the fact that two guardians had just basically quit their job to go and just be with each other, just to get these facts out of the way. Vampires are half Moroi and half human. Yes, I didn't mention that earlier. So this is how it goes. Moroi plus Moroi equals Moroi. Moroi plus Dampire equals Dampire. Wait, I feel like I need to fill up a Punnett square. The only thing that matters here is the fact that a Dampire and a Dampire cannot have a kid whatsoever. It's just biologically they cannot have children. Dampires are created from a Moroi and a human. Now, the difference between a Moroi and a Dampire can be seen in just physique alone. So Moroi are skinny, lean, just very thin, fragile looking, while Dampires are more human. They're filled out in certain places. They look more exotic, as the book says. It's huge gossip, and Rose feels very strong about the fact that they decided to quit being guardians and be off with each other. She has a very strong view about they shouldn't be doing that, or she's just not happy about the fact that this has happened specifically to guardians, and she's also not happy about the fact that gossip is going around about guardians. She, in my opinion, I don't like her. She's just not a likable character in my eyes, because she's kind of all over the place. She says one thing but does another, and it's just a lot with her. And so what we know about Dampires in there, because from this whole gossip session is where we also get some more information on Dampires. We find out that Dampires are, like I said earlier, Moroi and human. We find out that Dampires have enhanced senses. They have enhanced reflexes. However, their strength and endurance is from the human side. So they do leave the church at this point. Rose is still chewing on what she has found out about Shadow Kissed Anne, and the gossip that's going on. And as soon as they walk out the church, immediately snow is dumped on them, and so they're kind of just left soaking wet. We do find out that this was from the bullies. Maya has used her powers to drench the girls, really, and we find out that your powers cannot be used on other students here. Mason sees all of this and asks if Rose is okay, and she's like, well, I can't really physically do anything. If I do anything to get me in trouble, I'm gone, I'm kicked out. So he was like, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but here's some information that maybe you can utilize about Maya. And it's when we discover that as much as Maya tries to fit in with the royal crew, her parents are just servants to one of the royal Moroi. So one of them is a maid and another one's a groundskeeper. And so she basically is going to use this information later on to get back at Maya. Obviously, we flash forward a couple of days or weeks, and the girls are finally getting used to being back into that rhythm of being at school. During the extra training period that Rose has to do with Dimitri, that she just asks him straight up, every time I'm here, we're always doing running. You teach me how to actually kill a Strigoi. And he's like, hey, to be realistic here, the reason why I'm teaching you stamina and how to run is because that is going to be your number one choice whenever you're confronted with a Strigoi. We do find out here that there are 3 ways you can kill a Strigoi, which is either 1, by having a silver stake, 2, by taking off their head, or 3, by burning them alive. And he does give her this information so she understands, like, you know, sometimes you're not going to have those 3 things with you to be able to kill a Strigoi, so running is almost always going to be your best bet. When they're both running laps together, that she does get complimented on her running form from Mason, and Dimitri gets jealous that she got a compliment like that. So it's at the end of this where Rose gets a huge wave of terror coming off of Lisa, and she books it straight to where Lisa is in the dorms, and that's where we discover a mangled fox form in their dorm. Like in her dorm, and she's sharing a room with her cousin Natalie, who is the daughter of Prince Victor. So she's basically grew up with Natalie as well. So she sees that mangled fox in there and is just absolutely terrified at seeing that bloody figure there. She does reach out towards it, to which Rose tells Lisa to just stop, don't even touch it, don't even think about doing what she thinks you're trying to do. It's here where we discover that in the past, Lisa did come across a dead crow. Her and Rose were out on some kind of hangout after school hours, and she touches said dead crow, and the dead crow just comes back to life. Miss Carp was there and has saw that whole thing happen and told Rose and Lisa to never do that again. Like almost scared in a way. She's not surprised at the fact that Lisa was able to do that. She's just scared for Lisa to do it again. So she tells Rose, like, don't let her do that again. So with that thought in mind, Rose is immediately like, hey, do not touch the fox. I know what you're trying to do, but do not touch that thing. I believe either that same day or the next day, Rose is poking around trying to see who could have done that. She's like, immediately her first suspect is the girl that's been bullying Lisa for a little bit. And she asks Mason about it. And Mason's like, no, I don't think that's something she would do. Maybe check somewhere else. Now, given that the whole school now knows about the whole fox situation, you know, everyone and anyone is talking about it, including the bullies. So Maya and a couple of other people that she's like hanging out with are basically like talking to Rose and Lisa about the fox, and are like, oh, well, they could have did it to get attention or whatever. Lisa has been hanging out quite a bit with Christian, and she does share this class with them. And so there was one kid that was getting kind of close to Lisa, and Rose was like, man, I really want to do something about it, but again, she can't, because if she does, she gets kicked out. So like the kid's kind of getting close to Lisa, and it's like, you did it, huh? You did it. And next thing you know, this kid just goes up in flames. It is discovered that Christian is one of the 3 fire elemental users there, and 2 of them are bullies. The other one is Christian. So it's obvious that Christian was the one who set the kid on fire. And now the kid does not die or anything like that. The fire does not affect him whatsoever. It didn't hurt him. It wasn't meant to hurt him. The kid is like freaked out about it, and Christian is just laughing his ass off about that whole thing. I think it's either Rose or Lisa does get upset at Christian for doing that whole stunt, and he just says like, hey, well, I helped you guys out, so I mean, what's the big deal here? It is later that, like, if anything, it's actually pretty quick that Lisa sits here and promises Rose that she won't hang out with Christian anymore. And then the next thing you know, she's hanging out with Christian. And Rose finds out this information because she feels like some kind of sneaky emotion coming off of Lisa. We get Lisa's point of view from, like, this bond that they have. And so she's basically hanging out with Christian, speaking with him. It's here where, like, they're kind of, like, going back and forth about the whole fire thing. And she's like, well, how the heck did you know to do that? Like, this doesn't convince me that you're not going to turn Strigoi later. And he's like, well, I did read up that Moroi at one point did fight alongside their guardians to defend themselves, and now we just sit here and do nothing. And so she's like, oh, well, I don't believe you. I don't think, like, Moroi were sitting here fighting with their guardians to defend themselves. And he's like, well, you know, how do you think we were given these powers? It is from this small conversation, though, that we do kind of, like, get a hint that, like, Christian is kind of into Lisa and vice versa. Now, finally back into her head after the whole interaction that Lisa and Christian were having, she's, like, kind of upset that they're still meeting up behind her back, but she doesn't really dwell on it for too long, because she does meet up with Jesse. I believe they made some kind of plans for him to come over to the dorm and for them to like just fool around with each other. And so they do go to like some kind of like deserted part of the dorm where they're just chilling, hanging out. She plants the seed of gossip with Jesse, like, hey, you know, like Maya's parents are servants, they're cleaning toilets and da 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 da. And so he's like, huh, interesting. So from here, like Rose already knows that like she planted the seed and now this gossip is gonna spread like wildfire. They do like kind of get involved with each other to the point like where he gets kind of close to her neck and notices that like she reacts in the way that a feeder would react when they're about to be bitten. And so he's like, wait a minute, did Lisa feed on you? And Rose doesn't, as stupid as she is, she doesn't straight up as goes, no, that didn't happen. She stays quiet. Like, she's not very convincing in this part. Hey. So I was editing this video and it was unfortunate. This is just a little tangent. So the last clip is the last video that I have from that day. I realized that I probably spoke for an extra 3 hours and recorded none of it. So it has taken me a few days to like mentally come back to myself to finish off the rest of this video. This is Shayla from the future, the very far future, by the way, because I do believe I filmed this like a month and a half ago. So let's get back to it. Dude, my script is gone. I'm not gonna cry. I'm gonna have to give you the rest of this plot just off my dome, just off the top of my head. So forgive me if I miss some important details. All right, let's get this show on the road. Rose, I know Rose was really she was really stupid in this whole portion here. It's just like the one time that you don't have this whole like macho attitude, you can't shoot somebody down, you can't answer these questions. Jesse like keeps asking her like, so how did you guys get by? Jesse just stares at her and she just stares at him and he goes, no, Lisa fed off of you, and she doesn't tell him no. She doesn't say no. She doesn't tell him like, no, that's not true. Sorry, that has never happened to me before. So like she doesn't sit here and try and like deny anything that he's saying. She just stays quiet like an idiot. She stays quiet. He goes like, oh my gosh, okay, well, what if I just a little nibble? What if I do a little nibble? And she's like, no, I don't do that. I don't do that, no. And he's like, come on, just a little nibble. And she's like, no. But here's the reason why Rose is opposed to him even wanting to do that, is because, like I said before in the beginning of this video, Dampire, like a Moroi feeding off of a Dampire, is not a good look, especially if said Dampire is a guardian. It's just not a good look. It makes you look as if you're like ready to just give it up to everyone. She, in a school full of teenagers who are going to judge and cliques and stuff like that, Lord knows, drama, stuff like that. She doesn't want that to happen. And so she's very adamant about it. And he actually is like pretty forceful. Like I said before, like he doesn't understand what no means. And finally, the door of the room just burst open. And who comes through the door? Dimitri. Okay. Editor's note here, or not. Really, this is the outro. So clearly it's taking me a lot longer to edit this video than I thought it would. So, I mean, to be honest, with how much I have, including what I had to reshoot because of what I didn't record the first time around, this video is going to be a lot longer than I anticipated. So if I upload everything all at once, it would probably be almost like a 2-hour video, and I just don't want to do that. This is like going against what I actually said in the beginning of the video, by the way. It happens. It happens. Okay. So to just make this a little bit easier on myself right now in terms of timing, I'm going to upload part one. So this is part one. Thank you guys for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Any kind of interaction that you guys could do, liking, subscribing, commenting, anything like that, or even sharing it with your friends would be such a huge help. Upload speed is not going to be very fast, to be honest with you, but at this point, I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. But again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, interact with the video. I would really appreciate it. Other than that, have a great one. Remember, somebody's 1-star read could be somebody else's 5-star and vice versa. So let's be kind. Yeah. Bye.